The champagne flute trembled in my hand as Helena smiled that practiced smile she'd perfected over 15 years of marriage. Christmas morning in the Finlor house had always been sacred. Coffee brewing at dawn, presents under the 12-foot Douglas fir, and Helena's parents arriving precisely at 9 with their usual air of superiority. "Corbin, darling," Helena said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I have one more gift for you." I set down my coffee and watched as Darren Halloway, her father, leaned forward in his leather chair like a vulture sensing carrion. Fina Marin, Helena's mother, clutched her pearls with barely contained excitement. The envelope Helena extended toward me was thick, official-looking, and sealed with the kind of precision that screamed legal documents. "What's this?" I asked, though something in my gut already knew. "Your freedom," Helena replied, and Darren actually chuckled. I tore open the envelope and pulled out the papers. Divorce petition. Filed 3 days ago. Helena Trenwall Finlor versus Corbin James Finlor. Irreconcilable differences. The works. "Merry Christmas, Corbin," Fina said, raising her champagne flute. "To new beginnings." The room erupted in barely suppressed celebration. Darren stood up, practically bouncing on his heels. Helena's socialite friends, Jennifer Walsh, Patricia Morse, and that insufferable Rebecca Thornton, all exchanged knowing glances and congratulatory smiles. They'd been in on this. Every single one of them. "Well," I said, setting the papers on the coffee table with deliberate calm, "this is certainly unexpected." "Oh, Corbin," Helena said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to despise. "Don't be dramatic. We both know this marriage has run its course. I've already spoken with my attorney about a fair division of assets. The house will stay in the family, of course, and Daddy's business needs protection during this transition." Darren nodded vigorously. "Nothing personal, son, just business. Helena deserves security and we'll make sure she gets it." I glanced around the room. My living room, in the house I'd bought with the money I earned building Finlor Construction from nothing. These people were already carving up my life, openly pleased with themselves and making no effort to conceal it. "Fair division," I repeated slowly. "That's interesting, Helena. Very interesting." Something in my tone must have registered because her smile flickered for just a moment. "Now, Corbin," she said, "let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. We're all adults here." I stood up, walked to my desk in the corner of the room, and pulled out a manila folder I'd been keeping there for 2 weeks. The room went quiet as I returned to my chair and opened it. "You know what's funny about timing, Helena?" I said, pulling out my own set of documents. "Sometimes it's everything." Her face went pale. "What is that?" "These," I said, holding up the papers, "are my divorce papers, filed December 10th, 2 weeks before yours." The silence that followed was beautiful. Darren's champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips. Fina's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. Helena's friends suddenly found their shoes fascinating. "That's impossible," Helena whispered. "Oh, it's very possible. See, I've been watching you, Helena. Watching and waiting and documenting. Late nights at the gym with Liam Stroud. Those mysterious girls' nights that somehow never involved any of your actual friends. The credit card charges at the Pineview Motel." Helena's face went from pale to green. "You're bluffing." I pulled out a photograph, Helena and Liam Stroud in a passionate embrace outside the motel, time-stamped 3 weeks ago. Then another, and another. "Dashcam footage," I explained conversationally. "Amazing what technology can capture these days. I've got hours of it, Helena. Hours." Darren finally found his voice. "Now, see here, Corbin." "No, Darren, you see here." I pulled out another document. "This is a forensic accounting report showing attempts to transfer marital assets into shell companies controlled by your family. Did you really think I wouldn't notice $300,000 moving around?" The room was so quiet, You could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. The house, I continued, is mine. Bought before marriage, never added Helena's name to the deed despite her repeated requests. Smart move, as it turns out. Helena was shaking now. The business… Ah, yes. Holloway Motors. Funny thing about that business loan you co-signed, Darren. The one that requires my personal guarantee as collateral. I withdrew that guarantee yesterday. Bank should be calling you sometime after the holiday. Darren's face went purple. You can't do that. Already did. See, when you plan your wife's public humiliation as a Christmas surprise, it helps to have your ducks in a row first. I stood up again, gathering my papers. Helena's friends were already edging toward the door, clearly wanting no part of the disaster unfolding before them. So here's how this works, I said, my voice steady and calm. Helena, you can keep your divorce petition. Mine takes precedence, but the end result is the same. You get nothing. The house is mine, the business accounts are frozen, and your boyfriend's wife is getting copies of these photos this afternoon. Melody, Helena gasped. You wouldn't… Already did. Dropped them off this morning before I came home. Merry Christmas, Melody Stroud. Hope you enjoy your present. The exodus began immediately. Jennifer, Patricia, and Rebecca practically trampled each other getting to the door. Fina was hyperventilating into a paper bag. Darren was on his phone, probably calling his lawyer, though I doubted any attorney would be taking calls on Christmas Day. Helena remained frozen in her chair, staring at the photographs scattered across the coffee table. How long have you known? She finally whispered. Long enough, I replied. Long enough to document everything, secure everything, and plan for this moment. I loved you once, she said, and for the first time that morning, she sounded genuine. Maybe, I said, but you loved my money more, and you loved the idea of humiliating me even more than that. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. Time to go, folks, all of you. This is my house, and you're no longer welcome here. One by one, they filed out. Darren muttering threats about lawyers. Fina clutching her purse like a lifeline. Helena's friends whispering frantically to each other as they hurried to their cars. Helena was the last to leave. She paused in the doorway, looking back at the house that had been her home for 8 years. Where will I go? She asked. I hear the Pineview Motel has reasonable weekly rates, I replied, though you might want to call ahead. I suspect Liam won't be meeting you there anymore. She walked to her BMW, the one I'd bought her for her birthday 2 years ago, and drove away without another word. I closed the door, walked back to my chair, and poured myself another cup of coffee. The house was finally quiet. The Christmas tree lights twinkled peacefully, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. My phone buzzed. Text message from Nate Drummond, my best friend and former Army buddy. How'd it go? I typed back. Better than expected. Phase 1 complete. Phase 1? Came his immediate reply. I smiled as I typed my response. Nate, my friend, this was just the appetizer. The main course is yet to come. The Rusty Anchor hadn't changed much since I'd started drinking there 15 years ago. Same scarred wooden bar, same neon beer signs flickering intermittently, same cast of regulars who treated gossip like currency and information like gold. Barb Henley, the owner, had been running the place since before I moved to town, and she knew everyone's business better than they knew it themselves. Well, Barb said as I walked in that evening, if it isn't the man of the hour. Word traveled fast in a town of 8,000 people, especially when it involved the Holloway family. Darren had been throwing his weight around for decades, treating local contractors like servants and small business owners like inconveniences. Helena's public humiliation was the kind of story that spread like wildfire. Heard you gave Helena and her daddy quite the Christmas surprise, said Tommy Brennan, a plumber who'd worked several of my construction sites. About time someone knocked those people down a peg. I slid onto a bar stool and ordered a beer. Just protecting my interests, Tommy. Nothing more complicated than that. Nothing more complicated, my rear end, Barb said, sliding a bottle across the bar. Melody Stroud was in here 2 hours ago, crying into her wine and showing everyone those pictures you gave her. That gym rat husband of hers is in for a world of hurt. The satisfaction I felt was immediate and warming. Liam Stroud had been Helena's personal trainer for 6 months before becoming something more. Tall, muscled, and arrogant, he'd treated their affair like a game, probably never considering that his wife might find out or that there might be consequences. "Where is Liam now?" I asked casually. "Holed up at the gym, according to Melody. She threw him out of the house around noon. Neighbors say she was hurling his clothes out the bedroom window." Nate Drummond appeared at my elbow like a ghost, which was his specialty. 10 years of Army intelligence had taught him how to move quietly and gather information without being noticed. "Corbin," he said, settling onto the adjacent stool. "Heard you had an eventful morning. Word travels fast. Faster when Darren Halloway is driving around town like a maniac, trying to find a lawyer who'll take his call on Christmas Day." Nate signaled Barb for a beer. "Ran into Ms. Voss at the grocery store. She says Helena's been parked outside the house for 3 hours just sitting in her car." Ms. Voss was our neighborhood's unofficial intelligence network. Retired librarian, lived alone, and spent most of her time watching the street from her front window. If something happened within a 6-block radius, she knew about it within minutes. "Let her sit," I said. "Locks are changed, security system is updated. She's not getting back in." "Cold," Tommy said approvingly. "I like it." Barb leaned across the bar, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "You want to know something interesting? Helena's been meeting with more than just Liam Stroud." That got my attention. "What do you mean?" "Rebecca Thornton's husband works at the bank. Says Helena's been in there twice a week for the past month, asking about account transfers and loan procedures. Always with that slimy lawyer friend of her father's. What's his name? Peterson?" "Richard Peterson," I confirmed. Peterson was Darren's longtime attorney, the kind of man who specialized in finding loopholes and bending rules without quite breaking them. "That's the one. Word is they were trying to figure out how to protect assets in case of divorce. Guess they thought they were being clever." Nate and I exchanged glances. This was new information, and it painted Helena's Christmas ambush in an even more calculated light. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "According to Rebecca's husband, at least 2 months, maybe longer." 2 months. Helena had been planning this divorce for at least 2 months, meeting with lawyers and bankers, probably coordinating with her parents to ensure maximum damage to my finances. The affair with Liam was just the cherry on top of a very elaborate cake. "There's more," Barb continued. "Jennifer Walsh was in here last week, drunk as a skunk, bragging about how Helena was going to take Corbin for everything he's worth. Said something about teaching uppity contractors their place." The anger that flared in my chest was hot and immediate, but I kept my voice level. "Uppity contractors?" "Her words, not mine. Apparently, Helena's been telling her friends that you've gotten too big for your britches, that you needed to be reminded who the real power players are in this town." Tommy snorted. "Real power players? Darren Halloway couldn't run a lemonade stand without going bankrupt. His car lot's been hemorrhaging money for years." "Which explains why they need my guarantee on that business loan," I said, "and why they were so eager to get their hands on my assets." Nate was quiet, which usually meant he was thinking. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "This wasn't just about divorce, Corbin. This was about humiliation. They wanted to break you publicly, make an example of you." "Well," I said, taking a long pull from my beer, "they certainly made an example of someone." My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the gym. Liam." I showed the message to Nate, who grinned. "Looks like the other shoe is about to drop," he said. "Should I go?" "Absolutely, but not alone. He finished his beer in one gulp. This should be interesting. Barb wiped down the bar with a rag, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. You boys be careful now, and make sure to come back and tell me what happens. This is the best entertainment this town's had in years. The drive to Stroud Fitness took 10 minutes through quiet Christmas evening streets. Most of the houses were lit up with holiday decorations, families gathered inside for dinner and gift opening. It felt surreal to be heading toward what was likely to be an ugly confrontation, while the rest of the world celebrated peace on Earth. The gym was in a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town, all glass and steel and expensive equipment. Liam's pride and joy, built with money borrowed against his house and probably some creative financing I didn't want to think about too hard. His truck was the only vehicle in the parking lot. You sure about this? Nate asked as we got out of my truck. No, I admitted, but I'm curious what he has to say. The front door was unlocked. We walked through the empty reception area, past rows of gleaming exercise machines, toward the office in the back where light was visible under the door. I knocked. Come in, came Liam's voice, rough and strained. He was sitting behind his desk, looking like he'd aged 10 years since morning. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his gym clothes wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Corbin, he said, then noticed Nate. I said, come alone. You said we need to talk. You didn't specify terms. I settled into the chair across from his desk. Nate remained standing by the door, arms crossed. So talk. Liam ran his hands through his hair. Look, I know you're angry. Angry? I interrupted. Liam, I'm not angry. Angry would suggest I cared about you enough to have an emotional response. I don't. Then why are you here? Curiosity. You destroyed your marriage and helped destroy mine. Now you want to chat. I'm wondering what could possibly be worth saying. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he finally looked up, there was something desperate in his eyes. How much do you want? He asked. Excuse me? To keep this quiet, to not spread those pictures around town. How much? I felt Nate shift behind me, probably fighting the urge to laugh. Liam, I said slowly, those pictures are already around town. I gave them to your wife this morning, remember? She's been showing them to everyone at the Rusty Anchor. His face crumpled. Melody won't talk to me. She threw me out. Her brothers are coming up from Portland tomorrow and they're not happy. I imagine not. You don't understand. If this gets out, if it spreads beyond town, it'll ruin my business. I've got clients from 3 counties. Reputation is everything in this industry. Should have thought of that before you started sleeping with my wife. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The desperation in his voice was palpable now. Helena said you two were already finished, that you were just going through the motions. She said the divorce was inevitable. And you believed her? She was convincing. Said you'd grown apart, that you barely talked anymore, that you were just staying together out of habit. There was probably some truth to that, I realized. Helena and I had been going through the motions for months, maybe years, but that didn't excuse what they'd done, and it certainly didn't excuse the way they'd planned to humiliate me. Even if that were true, I said, adultery is adultery, and planning to ambush me on Christmas morning is something else entirely. Liam's shoulders sagged. I know it was wrong, but Helena, she had this whole plan worked out. Said her family's lawyer could make sure everyone got a fair shake, that nobody had to get hurt. Fair shake, I repeated. Right. Was it fair when you two were meeting at the Pineview Motel? Was it fair when Helena was trying to transfer our assets into her family's accounts? Was it fair when she planned to serve me divorce papers on Christmas morning in front of her gloating parents? I didn't know about any of that financial stuff, Liam said quickly. That was all Helena and her family. But you knew about the Christmas ambush. He was quiet. Answer me, Liam. Did you know Helena was planning to humiliate me in front of her family? Yes, he whispered. And you were okay with that? I thought it would be easier, like ripping off a bandage. I stood up. Well, congratulations. You ripped off the bandage. How's that working out for you? Please, Corbin. There has to be something I can do to fix this. There is, I said, heading for the door. You can live with the consequences of your choices, just like the rest of us. Nate and I walked back through the empty gym in silence. It wasn't until we were back in the truck that he finally spoke. That was almost sad, he said. Almost, I agreed. But not quite. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Ms. Voss. Helena's car is gone. Saw her loading suitcases. Thought you should know. I showed the message to Nate. Running home to Mommy and Daddy? He asked. Probably, which means tomorrow should be very interesting. Why's that? I started the truck and pulled out of the parking lot. Because tomorrow, Darren Halloway gets to explain to his bank why his loan guarantee just disappeared, and Helena gets to explain to her parents why their plan to take me for everything I'm worth just backfired spectacularly. Think they'll try to fight back? Oh, I'm counting on it, I said. This is just the beginning, Nate. Phase 2 starts tomorrow. The next morning brought 3 phone calls before I'd finished my first cup of coffee. The first was from Richard Peterson, Darren's lawyer, demanding a meeting to discuss reasonable terms for settling the divorce. The second was from Helena, sobbing into the phone about how I was destroying innocent people. The third was from Melody Stroud, thanking me for opening her eyes and asking if I had any more evidence of her husband's infidelity. I agreed to meet with Peterson at his office that afternoon, told Helena that innocent people don't commit adultery and fraud, and assured Melody that I'd share everything I had if she needed it for her own divorce proceedings. By noon, I was sitting across from Peterson in his wood-paneled office, watching him try to project authority while clearly operating from a position of weakness. Corbin, he said, adjusting his tie, I think we can work something out that benefits everyone involved. I'm listening. Helena is willing to be reasonable about the asset division. She understands that emotions are running high, but she believes, and I agree, that a fair settlement is in everyone's best interest. Define fair. Peterson pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. Helena is prepared to accept a modest settlement in exchange for a quick, quiet divorce. $200,000 plus half the value of the house. I didn't bother opening the folder. The house that's in my name only, bought with my money before we were married. Well, yes, but Helena contributed to the household. Helena contributed adultery and attempted fraud. That's not typically considered a marital asset. Peterson's professional smile flickered. Now, Corbin, there's no need for hostility. We're all adults here. Adults don't ambush their spouses with divorce papers on Christmas morning. Adults don't try to steal marital assets. Adults don't commit adultery and then demand payment for it. The adultery allegations are unproven. I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the photos of Helena and Liam. His face went pale. As I was saying, I continued, Helena contributed adultery. The settlement she gets is what the law requires, which in this case is nothing. Be reasonable, Corbin. Helena needs somewhere to live, some way to support herself. Helena is a grown woman with a college degree and work experience. She can get a job like the rest of us. Peterson leaned back in his chair, clearly changing tactics. What about Darren's business? Surely you don't want to see a local employer fail because of a personal dispute. Darren's business is failing because Darren is a poor businessman who borrowed more money than he could pay back. My personal guarantee was a favor to Helena, not a business investment. But the jobs are not my responsibility. Darren should have thought about his employees before he decided to help his daughter commit fraud. Peterson was quiet for a moment, studying the papers in front of him. When he looked up, his expression had hardened. You're making a mistake, Corbin. The Halloway family has deep roots in this community. They have friends, connections, influence. You're just a contractor who got lucky with a few big projects. Is that a threat, Richard? It's a reality check. You might win this battle, but you'll lose the war. Helena's family can make your life very difficult in this town. I stood up. Let them try. I've been building my reputation in this community for 15 years, one honest job at a time. The Holloway family has been coasting on inherited money and borrowed influence. We'll see which foundation is stronger. I was halfway to the door when Peterson called after me. What do you want, Corbin? What will it take to settle this reasonably? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I turned back. I want Helena to sign the divorce papers without contest. I want her to acknowledge in writing that she has no claim to any of my assets. And I want Darren to find a new guarantor for his business loan. And in return? In return, I won't file charges for attempted fraud. I won't sue for alienation of affection, and I won't share the photos of Helena and Liam with anyone else. That's not much of an offer. It's the only offer. Take it or leave it. I left Peterson's office and drove straight to the bank. Margaret Foster, the loan officer who'd handled Darren's business financing, was expecting me. Corbin, she said, gesturing to a chair in her office, I have to say this is highly irregular. But legal? Yes, it's legal. Your personal guarantee was voluntary, and you have the right to withdraw it with proper notice. But the timing is unusual. Unusual circumstances call for unusual timing. Margaret pulled out Darren's file. Without your guarantee, the loan becomes immediately callable. The bank will have no choice but to demand full payment within 30 days. How much does he owe? $450,000. I whistled softly. That's a lot of money for a failing car lot. Between you and me, Margaret said quietly, we've been concerned about this loan for months. Darren's been making minimum payments, and his sales figures don't justify the debt load. So calling the loan might actually be doing the bank a favor. I didn't say that, Margaret replied with a slight smile, but I did not say it either. I signed the paperwork withdrawing my guarantee, effective immediately. Margaret promised to call Darren before the end of business day. My next stop was the Rusty Anchor, where Barb was holding court with the afternoon crowd. The bar was busier than usual for a weekday, probably because word of the Holloway family drama had drawn curious spectators. Corbin, Barb called out as I walked in. Perfect timing. Melody Stroud just left. She wanted me to thank you again for the photos. How's she holding up? Better than expected. Turns out she's been suspicious for months. Your evidence just confirmed what she already knew. I ordered a beer and settled onto my usual stool. The afternoon crowd included several of my construction workers, a few local business owners, and Tommy Brennan, who was clearly enjoying the ongoing drama. Heard you met with Peterson this afternoon? Tommy said. How'd that go? About as expected. They offered me the privilege of paying Helena for the honor of divorcing her. And you said? I said no. The laughter that rippled through the bar was warm and supportive. These were working people who understood the value of honest labor and had little patience for the kind of entitled behavior the Holloway family represented. What's next? Asked Mike Sullivan, one of my foremen. Now we wait and see how they react to having their bluff called. I didn't have to wait long. My phone rang 20 minutes later, Darren Holloway, and he was furious. You son of a gun, he shouted into the phone. What the heck do you think you're doing? I'm protecting my interests, Darren, just like you taught me. The bank called. They want their money back. $450,000. Then you better start selling cars. This is extortion. No, Darren, this is business. You borrowed money you couldn't pay back, using my guarantee as collateral. I withdrew the guarantee. Now the bank wants their money. That's how loans work. We had a deal. We had a family relationship. Your daughter ended that relationship when she decided to commit adultery and fraud." There was a long pause. When Darren spoke again, his voice was lower, more controlled. "What do you want?" "I want Helena to sign the divorce papers. I want her to acknowledge she has no claim to my assets, and I want you to leave me alone." "And if we do that?" "Then you have 30 days to find a new guarantor for your loan. Good luck with that." I hung up and turned back to the bar. The entire crowd was watching me with expressions of admiration and amusement. "Cold," Tommy said approvingly. "Very cold." "Sometimes cold is what the situation requires." Barb leaned across the bar. "You know they're not going to give up easy, right? The Holloway family doesn't like to lose." "Neither do I," I replied. "The difference is, I'm better at winning." My phone buzzed with a text message from Nate. "Helena's at her parents' house, lots of shouting. Ms. Voss says she can hear them from across the street." I typed back, "Phase 2 is working perfectly." "What's Phase 3? Came his immediate reply. I looked around the bar at the faces of people who'd supported me, who understood that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, who appreciated seeing entitled bullies get their comeuppance. "Phase 3, I typed, is where things get really interesting. The war was just beginning, and I intended to win it decisively. Helena and her family had made the mistake of thinking I was just another pushover contractor who would roll over when faced with their money and connections. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new confrontations, and new opportunities to show them exactly who they were dealing with. I finished my beer, said goodbye to the crowd at the Rusty Anchor, and headed home to plan my next move. The house was quiet and peaceful without Helena's constant drama and her family's toxic presence. For the first time in months, it felt like home again. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was in my workshop behind the house, reviewing blueprints for a commercial project, when Ms. Voss appeared at my door carrying a plate of cookies and wearing the expression of someone bursting with information. "Corbin, dear," she said, settling into the folding chair I kept for visitors, "I thought you should know what happened at the Holloway house last night." Ms. Voss was 73 years old, lived alone since her husband passed 5 years ago, and had turned neighborhood surveillance into an art form. She knew everyone's schedule, everyone's visitors, and everyone's business. In a situation like this, she was invaluable. "I'm listening," I said, accepting the cookies gratefully. "Well, Helena came home around 6 o'clock, crying and carrying on something awful. Then Darren showed up an hour later, shouting about banks and loans and how you were trying to ruin them. Fina was on the phone with someone, probably that lawyer, and the whole house was in chaos." "Sounds about right. But here's the interesting part," Ms. Voss continued, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Around 9 o'clock, 3 cars pulled up. Expensive cars, city license plates, men in suits. That got my attention. Did you recognize any of them?" "Never seen them before in my life. But they were inside for 2 hours, and when they left, Darren was standing on the porch looking like someone had punched him in the stomach." "Interesting. Darren owed money to the bank, but apparently he owed money to other people as well. People who drove expensive cars and made house calls after dark." "There's more," Ms. Voss said. "This morning, Helena left the house with 2 suitcases. Fina was crying on the front porch, and Darren's been on the phone all morning, pacing around the yard like a caged animal. Any idea where Helena went?" "Jennifer Walsh's house, according to the mailman. Though I doubt she'll be welcome there for long, considering how this whole mess has embarrassed Helena's social circle." That made sense. Helena's friends had been happy to participate in what they thought would be my public humiliation, but now that the tables were turned, they'd want to distance themselves from the scandal. "Miss Voss," I said, "you're a treasure. Thank you for keeping me informed." She beamed at the compliment. "Oh, it's my pleasure, dear. This is the most excitement this neighborhood has seen in years." After she left, I called Nate and filled him in on the latest developments. "Expensive cars and men in suits," he said, That doesn't sound like bank representatives. No, it doesn't. Darren's been living beyond his means for years. Maybe he borrowed money from sources that don't require collateral paperwork. Want me to do some digging? Carefully. I want to know what we're dealing with, but I don't want to poke any hornet's nests. Understood. What about Helena? Let her run to her friends. They'll get tired of her drama soon enough, and then she'll have to face reality. I spent the rest of the morning working on project estimates, trying to maintain some normalcy while my personal life exploded around me. Around noon, my secretary called from the office. "Corbin," Linda said, "you've got 3 messages from Peterson's office, 2 from Helena, and 1 from someone named Jennifer Walsh, who sounds very upset." "I'll deal with Peterson later. Ignore Helena's calls." "What did Jennifer want?" "She wants Helena out of her house immediately. Apparently, there was some kind of scene this morning involving Jennifer's husband and accusations about who knew what when." I couldn't help but smile. Helena's friends were learning that loyalty only extended so far, especially when scandal threatened their own reputations. "Any business calls?" "Actually, yes. 4 new project inquiries. Word is getting around about your situation, and apparently, people respect how you're handling it." That was unexpected but welcome news. In a small town, reputation was everything, and it seemed like mine was being enhanced rather than damaged by the divorce drama. "Schedule the estimates for next week. I want to keep the business moving forward." "Will do. Oh, and Corbin, good for you. Helena and her family had this coming." After hanging up, I drove to the Rusty Anchor for lunch. The place was packed, and conversations stopped when I walked in. Not in a hostile way, more like people were curious to see how I was holding up under the pressure. "Corbin," Barb called out, "your usual table is waiting." I settled into the corner booth I preferred and ordered a sandwich. Before the food arrived, I had 3 visitors. The first was Tommy Brennan, who slid into the seat across from me with a grin. "Heard Helena's wearing out her welcome at Jennifer Walsh's place," he said. "Jennifer's husband kicked her out this morning." That was fast. Apparently, Helena spent the night calling him and every other husband in her social circle, trying to get them to pressure their wives into supporting her. Didn't go over well. The second visitor was Mike Sullivan, my foreman, who had news about the business. "Boss," he said, "we just got a call from the Riverside Shopping Center project. They want to move up the timeline and expand the scope. Apparently, the developer heard about your situation and was impressed with how you're handling it." "Impressed how?" His words were, "Any man who can outmaneuver the Holloway family is someone I want on my team." The third visitor was Melody Stroud, who looked tired but determined. "Corbin," she said, sitting down without invitation, "I wanted to thank you again for the evidence. My lawyer says it's more than enough for a favorable divorce settlement." "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected. It's amazing how much energy you have when you stop pretending everything is fine." She paused, then leaned forward. "I also wanted to warn you about something." "I'm listening." "Liam's been calling Helena, trying to coordinate their stories. They're planning something. I don't know what, but they're desperate. Desperate people do stupid things." "Any specifics?" "Not really. But Liam mentioned something about fighting back and showing you what real consequences look like." After Melody left, I sat alone with my sandwich and considered the situation. Helena and her family were backed into a corner, facing financial ruin and social humiliation. Liam was looking at divorce and the potential collapse of his business. Desperate people indeed did stupid things. My phone rang. "Nate." "I did some digging on those visitors to the Holloway house," he said without preamble. "You're not going to like this." "Tell me." "Darren owes money to some very unpleasant people in Portland. The kind of people who don't accept the check is in the mail as a payment plan." "How much?" "Best I can determine, around $200,000. High-interest loans secured against the car lot and his house." I whistled softly. "So he's leveraged to the hilt. Worse than that. Word is he took the money to cover gambling debts. Darren's been making regular trips to the casino in Connecticut, and he's not very good at it. This changed things significantly. Darren wasn't just facing a bank loan default, he was facing people who had very direct ways of collecting debts. How much time does he have? Not much. My source says they gave him 2 weeks to come up with a payment plan. That was 3 days ago. And without my loan guarantee, he has no collateral to offer the bank for an extension. Exactly. He's trapped. I thought about this for a moment. Darren's financial problems weren't my responsibility, but they explained the desperation behind Helena's Christmas ambush. They'd been planning to use my assets to solve his debt problems. Nate, I need you to be extra careful with your information gathering. If these people think I'm involved in their business, things could get complicated. Already thought of that. I'm staying well clear of anything that might draw their attention. Good. Keep monitoring the situation, but from a safe distance. After hanging up, I finished my lunch and drove home. The house was still peaceful, still felt like a sanctuary, but I was beginning to understand that the war I'd started was going to be more complex than I'd initially thought. Helena and her family weren't just fighting for money, they were fighting for survival. That made them more dangerous, but it also made them more likely to make mistakes. I spent the afternoon reviewing my security measures, making sure the house was properly protected, and considering my next moves. Phase 3 was going to require careful planning and perfect execution. As the sun set, I sat on my back porch with a beer, looking out over the yard Helena had once filled with elaborate garden parties and social gatherings. The quiet was profound and satisfying. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I was content to enjoy the peace I'd fought so hard to achieve. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You've made a big mistake. This isn't over." I deleted the message without responding. Empty threats were just noise, and I'd learned long ago not to let noise distract me from the signal. The real battle was just beginning. 3 days later, Helena made her last desperate play. I was having coffee with Nate at the Rusty Anchor when she walked in, flanked by 2 men I didn't recognize. The entire bar went quiet, conversations stopping mid-sentence as everyone turned to watch what promised to be the final confrontation. Helena looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her expensive clothes looked like she'd slept in them. The men with her were clearly out of place in the working-class bar, expensive suits, manicured nails, and the kind of predatory awareness that suggested they were comfortable with violence. "Corbin," Helena said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "We need to talk." "I'm listening," I replied, not moving from my stool. She approached slowly, her companions staying near the door. "You've had your fun. You've humiliated me, destroyed my family's business, and ruined my reputation. Are you satisfied?" "I didn't destroy anything, Helena. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your choices." "My choices?" Her voice rose, and I could see the desperation behind her anger. "What about your choices? What about the way you neglected our marriage? The way you put your business before our relationship?" "Even if that were true," I said calmly, "it doesn't justify adultery. It doesn't justify fraud. And it certainly doesn't justify trying to ambush me on Christmas morning." One of her companions stepped forward. He was tall, well-built, and had the kind of face that suggested he'd been in more than his share of fights. "Maybe we should discuss this privately," he said, his voice carrying a subtle threat. Nate shifted beside me, and I could feel the tension in the room ratchet up several notches. The other patrons were watching intently, and I noticed Tommy Brennan had quietly moved to block the back exit. "I don't think we've been introduced," I said to the stranger. "Name's Vincent Caruso," he replied. "I'm a business associate of Mr. Halloway's." "Ah," I said, understanding immediately. "You're one of Darren's creditors." "That's right. And Mr. Halloway's financial difficulties are creating problems for a lot of people. I can imagine, but I fail to see how that's my concern. Caruso smiled, but there was no warmth in it. See, here's the thing. Darren borrowed money based on certain assumptions about his family's assets. When those assumptions turned out to be wrong, it created what you might call a cascading problem. Meaning Darren can't pay what he owes. His daughter can't help him because her husband, that would be you, has cut off access to the family money. So now everyone's in a difficult position. Helena was watching this exchange with growing panic. Clearly, involving Caruso hadn't been her idea, and she was beginning to realize how badly she'd miscalculated. "Vincent," she said nervously, "maybe we should—" "Quiet," Caruso said without looking at her. "The adults are talking." I stood up slowly, keeping my hands visible and my voice calm. "Mr. Caruso, I understand you have a business relationship with Darren Holloway, but I don't. Whatever debts he's accumulated are between you and him." "That's where you're wrong," Caruso replied. "See, when Darren borrowed our money, he told us about his son-in-law's construction business. He told us about the house, the assets, the family connections. He made it sound like the money was guaranteed by the whole family. Darren lied to you. Yeah, we figured that out. Question is, what are we going to do about it?" The threat was clear now, and I could see Helena beginning to understand the magnitude of what she'd unleashed. By involving her father's creditors, she'd escalated the situation beyond anything I could have imagined. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent bar. "You're going to leave. Helena's going to sign the divorce papers without contest, and Darren's going to deal with his own debts like a grown man." Caruso laughed. "Or what? Or I call the police and report that you're attempting to extort money from me using threats of violence. You think the police scare me?" "No," I said, "but I think prison does. You're already walking a fine line with your collection methods. Adding extortion to your resume probably isn't the smartest career move." For a moment, the tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Caruso was clearly weighing his options, calculating whether the potential reward was worth the risk. The calculation changed when the front door opened and Sheriff Robert Martinez walked in. Martinez was a good man, honest and competent, and he'd been keeping an eye on the situation since it started. "Afternoon, folks," Martinez said casually, but his hand was resting on his service weapon. "Everything okay here?" "Just having a conversation, Sheriff," Caruso replied, but his posture had shifted subtly. "Good to hear. You gentlemen aren't from around here, are you?" "Just visiting." "Well, I hope you enjoy your stay. Drive carefully on your way out of town. We take traffic safety very seriously around here." The message was clear. Caruso and his companion were being politely but firmly told to leave. Helena looked like she was about to collapse. "This isn't over," Caruso said quietly, but he was already moving toward the door. "Yes," I replied, "it is." After they left, the bar erupted in conversation. Martinez approached my table, his expression serious. "Corbin, you want to tell me what that was about?" I explained the situation as briefly as possible. Helena's affair, the divorce, Darren's debts, and the apparent involvement of some very unpleasant creditors. "You think they'll be back?" Martinez asked. "I doubt it. They're businessmen, not thugs. Bad publicity and police attention are bad for business. Still, I'll have my deputies keep an eye on things for the next few days." After Martinez left, Helena remained standing near my table, looking lost and defeated. "Corbin," she said quietly, "I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go this far." "But they did go this far, Helena. You made choices, and choices have consequences. What happens now? Now you sign the divorce papers. You accept that you have no claim to my assets. You find somewhere to live and something to do with your life. And you leave me alone. And my father's debts? Are your father's problem. He made his choices, too." Helena nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I really did love you once. Maybe, I said. But love isn't enough when it's not backed up by loyalty and respect. She left without another word, walking out of the bar and out of my life. The crowd watched her go, then gradually returned to their conversations and their drinks. Well, Nate said, that was intense. It was necessary, I replied. Sometimes you have to be willing to go all the way to get people to back down. Think it's really over? With Helena? Yes. With her family's creditors? Probably. They're not going to risk serious legal trouble over a debt they can't collect anyway. And Darren? Darren's going to have to figure out his own problems. Maybe losing everything will teach him some humility. The next morning, Peterson called to arrange a meeting to finalize the divorce papers. Helena had agreed to sign without contest, acknowledging no claim to my assets. The whole process would be completed within 30 days. 2 weeks later, I ran into Melody Stroud at the grocery store. She looked healthier and happier than I'd seen her in months. "Corbin," she said, "I wanted to thank you again. The divorce is final, and I got everything I asked for." "How's Liam handling it?" "Not great. The gym is struggling. It turns out many of his clients were there for him, not the workouts. Once the relationship came out, that setup collapsed fast." "And Helena?" "Last I heard, she moved to Portland. Got a job with an event planning company. Probably better for everyone." That evening, I sat on my back porch with a beer, enjoying the peace and quiet of my reclaimed home. The Christmas lights were long gone, spring was beginning to show itself, and life was returning to normal. My phone buzzed with a text from Nate. "Heard from Ms. Voss. Darren's house is up for sale. Family's moving to Florida." I typed back, "New beginnings for everyone." "Any regrets?" came his reply. I thought about that for a moment. Helena and I had shared 15 years, some of them good. Her family had been part of my life for a long time. There was sadness in seeing it all end, even if the ending was necessary. But regrets? No. "None," I typed back. "Sometimes you have to burn down the old to make room for the new." The war was over. I had won, not through violence or cruelty, but through preparation, patience, and the willingness to follow through on my principles. Helena had tried to humiliate and rob me, and instead had lost everything she'd tried to protect. Justice, it turned out, was its own reward. The house was quiet, peaceful, and finally mine again. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities, but tonight I was content to enjoy the victory I'd earned. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be a victim.